The 51 episodes of Doctor Who that I love the most. My name is Ben, and if I time this right, we'll be loading this up on my 51st birthday, which is why we're talking about the 51 episodes of my favorite TV show that I'm the most fond of. We're talking in my car because it's convenient for sound, and it's a little bit dark because it's kind of early in the morning, so it'll be lightening up as we go along. With a list like this, all sorts of disclaimers apply. First of all, we're only talking about the Revived series from 2005. I like the old show too, but it's been a lot longer since I've seen most of those episodes, so if I try to list my favorites, I tend to just go to the ones I've rewatched the most recently. It's also sometimes a bit subjective to know where one story ends and another one begins, so when that's the case, I've just made decisions based on how I feel about it. And finally, we're not saying that these are the best episodes, because that's a bit more harder to prove. We're only saying that these are the ones that I love the most, at least at the moment. Number 51. Like workers everywhere, we're fighting the suits. Oxygen. This is the first story in Peter Capaldi's final season that I really enjoyed. It's gripping and tense, but it also gets some good Doctor gets to be clever kind of moments. It's got some interesting commentary going on there with the idea that air itself is something you have to struggle for economically, but it never gets in the way of the story, which is something that Doctor Who's not always been good at. Number 50. Words matter. One death, one ripple, and history will change in a blink. The Haunting of Villa Diodati. Now, there are other Chris Chibnall-era stories that I enjoy, but this is actually the only one that I liked enough to make it onto this list. A lot of times I feel like his stories fall apart at the landing, so maybe the reason I enjoy this is because it's really the opening volley of an adventure that spreads over 3 episodes. But it is an atmospheric little pseudo-historical story that sets up some neat ideas. Number 49. Now, you listen to me. You're going to be alone now, and you're very bad at that. Face the Raven. Now, Face the Raven features an unnecessarily convoluted plot as part of its plot. Surely there must have been an easier way to slip a bracelet onto the Doctor's wrist. But still, it has a neat setting and a cool dilemma, and of course a terribly sad ending for Clara. That has some really lovely dialogue and some great performances from the series leads. Number 48. This isn't just night. All the stars have burnt out and faded away to nothing. Utopia, The Sound of the Drums, and The Last of the Time Lords. Now, there's actually a lot about this story that I don't like. I don't like John Sims' manic lunacy as the Master. I don't like the way the Doctor is reduced to this weird CGI bird thing for much of the last episode, and I don't like the overly messianic vibe of the ending. But the 3-parter has sufficiently epic scope to still be enjoyable nonetheless. I like Derek Jacobi a lot, and it's actually a really great Martha story and gives her a strong and dignified ending. Number 47. We're lining all the highways with trees so invading forces can march in the shade. The God Complex. Toby Whithouse's intriguing mystery offers some cool moments with the regular cast and some fun guest characters, including a novel new alien species from the planet Tivoli, which happens to also be the name of a small town near where I went to college. It features some fun, nightmarish, and surreal imagery, and is overall a good story. Number 46. You're quite the funny man, and yet I think laughing on purpose at the darkness. Smith and Jones. Now, speaking of funny new alien species, this episode gives us the Jadoon, which I think is one of Russell T Davies' more successful efforts at this. At the time, it was a bit hard to imagine how the show was going to continue without Rose, but that's not something you really think about anymore. The episode turns out to be just a big dose of silly fun with a hospital being transported to the moon, and it does a good job introducing Martha. Number 45. Sorry, can't stop. What are you going to do? Tell my dad. The Doctor's Daughter. Now, this is a neat idea that lets David Tennant really strut his stuff as the last of the Time Lords. Georgia Moffat's Jenny is a breath of fresh air, and Donna is great as normal. I think the story would have made a little bit more sense if the battle had been going on for like a couple of months rather than just 7 days. But then I guess the story would have lost a little bit of the creation myth shtick that it was going for. Number 44. The name you choose, it's like a promise you make. He's the one who broke the promise. The name of the Doctor. Now, I was glad to see the end of the whole Impossible Girl story arc with Clara, but I thought the resolution was clever and fun. I can never really buy the way that the Doctor ignores the River Song apparition, but I like the way that she reacts to Clara, and I love the killer ending with the introduction to John Hurt, and one of the best title drops that the show has ever had. But not in the name of the Doctor. Number 43. Tiller This is the story of Amelia Pond, and this is how it ends. The Angels take Manhattan. Now, it's hard for me not to think of this story without thinking about that ludicrous idea of the Statue of Liberty being a weeping angel. Is there ever a time when that thing is not being looked at? It's a building, so what if it's being looked at from the inside? What if everybody inside of it blinks all at once? But if we can get past that, for the idea of the Weeping Angel's farm, which is quite creepy, and for the chemistry from amongst the regular cast, and for the emotional ending, and especially the bit where the doctor is reading that letter from Amy, this episode is worth it. Number 42. I met the Emperor, and I took the time vortex and poured it in his head. Army of Ghosts and Doomsday. Now, this season finale does some things that we hadn't had before. We got the Daleks and Cybermen face-to-face on screen for the first time. The snarky Daleks are pretty funny, although I think the battle is a little bit one-sided. The season arc shows more planning than we'd had before, both in the old show or the new. And of course, Rose's farewell is quite emotional and brutal. Number 41. The Doctor is very precious to me, you're right. But do you know what else he is, Madame Kavorian? Not here. The Wedding of River's Song. Now, this episode is all over the place, but it's still got lots of cool stuff. Time collapsing into a single moment, the Doctor and Winston Churchill evading the silence, Amy showing just how angry she could be. Season 6's story arc is probably the most narratively ambitious thing that the show has ever attempted, and while it was not completely successful, it was still good fun. Number 40. What do you think of the new look? I was hoping for minimalism, but I think I came out with magician. Time Heist. I quite like this one. There's a lot of neat ideas, multiple levels of clones, strange memory erasures, a lot of non-linear storytelling, and an unexpectedly upbeat ending. And it's appropriate that somewhere in Doctor Who's long history there is a big, fun heist story. Number 39. Ice can burn, sofas can read. It's a big universe. Amy's Choice. Now, this isn't the best story, but I still like it quite a bit. The whole idea of going back and forth between two realities and not being sure which one's the dream, that's quite novel and neat. Toby Jones is as creepy as ever as the villain, and it was nice to finally kind of like put to rest the whole question of is it Rory or the Doctor who is the man for Amy, even if the show did decide to dip its toes back in that water again in the future. Number 38.
Then you stole me, and I stole you.
The Doctor's Wife. Now, at the time that this came out, this episode was a really big deal. Time and reflection have diminished it a little bit, but it's still a story with good plotting and interesting dialogue. Idris is obviously a new and dynamic sort of character, a fresh take on the TARDIS itself, who gives Matt Smith a lot to work with. Number 37.
This facility was built to give people the chance to live. I walked in here and died.
The Girl Who Waited. This is a fascinating high-concept kind of a story. Karen Gillan does a really good job portraying the two different versions of Amy. Of course, we know it's going to be the younger one that's going to be around for the long run, but the episode does a good job dealing with this dilemma. There's a few things you could nitpick with the episode, but overall, it's quite good. Number 36. Then you'll know that there is a line in the sand, and I'm the man on the other side of it. The Pyramid at the End of the World and The Lie of the Land. Now, this is a funny story. It's a two-parter, or is it two parts of a three-parter? They're actually written and directed by different people, but I'm counting these two together. I think Pyramid is probably the stronger story, but there are things in both that I like. By this point in the season, the 12th Doctor, with Bill and Nardole and Missy, that cast was working together really well. This isn't a masterpiece, but it's still one of the season's bigger stories that I enjoyed quite a bit. Number 35. Not a good word, trapdoor. Never met a trapdoor I liked. The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. Now, over the years of Doctor Who, there's been lots of interesting alien races, there's been lots of ancient evil threats that have to be faced, and there's been lots of small groups of humans that are trapped and getting picked off one at a time. So in this story, there's not a lot that's new, but it does bring together all those familiar elements in a way that is stylish and scary and fun. Number 34. Don't tell me. The hospital's back. Well, isn't that wizard? Turn left. Now, there's something about Rose Tyler's involvement in this story that doesn't, I think, make complete sense. But when the episode focuses on Donna Noble and the intriguing alternate history that she's living through, then it is a winner. Number 33. It makes noise. That makes it Sonic. The Next Doctor. This story doesn't have a very good reputation for some reason, but I really like it. I think that the villain is good. I like the emotional richness of the Jackson Lake character. And the fact that the episode for the first time shows us archive footage of all the previous Doctors doesn't hurt. Number 32. I think I'm going to need a bigger flowchart. The Husbands of River Song. Now this is a messy story, but I still really like it. There's some really good chemistry between the 12th Doctor and River. There's a romantic moment where the 12th Doctor basically creates the restaurant that he takes River to on their last date, and a really funny bit where the Doctor pretends to be a guy entering the TARDIS for the first time. Number 31. Sir, permission to express my opposition to your current apathy. The Snowmen. It's a nice bit of continuity that the show brings back the Great Intelligence and even shows us its creation. I think Strax is always hilarious. But what really makes this episode work is the charm and energy that Clara brings to the show, really functioning as a companion for the first time, even if the character does end up dying again. Number 30. You'd be wizard at writing Christmas crackers, you two. Extremis. It's a gripping and trippy little thriller with some good chemistry amongst the series leads and the novelty of seeing the Doctor having to deal with the crisis while being blind. Number 29. Look, I'm the Doctor. And even I think this is insane. The Return of Dr. Mysterio. Now, I really like comic book stories and superheroes, so I enjoyed all the Easter eggs and references in this episode. It's all a bit silly, but there's something really sweet about the relationship between Grant and Lucy, and the origin story of the Ghost, such as it is hilarious. Number 28. The bravery of idiots is bravery nonetheless. The Sontarn Stratagem and the Poison Sky. Now, I seem to like this episode better than most people, but I think General Stahl of the Sontarn Empire is a great villain, well played by Christopher Ryan. I like his face-off with the Doctor at the end. It's nice to see Unit and Martha again, and Donna is always a treat. Number 27. I think you'll find I'm universally recognized as a mature and responsible adult. A Christmas Carol. Now, the first Christmas episode of the Stephen Moffat era didn't make much of an impression on me when I first watched it, but it's grown on me since. It makes great use of Matt Smith's manic energy, and it does a good job taking the timey-wimey weirdness of the series and presenting it like magic in the eyes of a child. Number 26. Scotland's never conquered anywhere, you know. Not even Shetland. Let's kill Hitler. Now here's a story that I know a lot of people don't like, but it earns high marks from me. The revelation that Mel's is River Song is one of the best surprises of the River Song storyline. And the Tesselecta antibodies, they're a bit of a fill-in villain, but they still made me laugh. Number 25. She's doing that old eyes thing because her face is so wide. She needs 3 mirrors. Listen. This is one of the stranger episodes I've seen. You start off thinking you're in this gripping monster story, but then suddenly it takes this swerve and turns into this psychological exploration of the Doctor's motives. It's not the kind of story you want every episode to be, but I'm glad we've got this one. Number 24. Tea. While we're waiting for the world to come to an end. How very British.
And it's a new day.
The Christmas Invasion. About a third of this story is amazing, and thankfully it's the last third. David Tennant's near monologue in the final act really cements his character, and makes this whole journey that we've taken through spinning Christmas trees and alien Santas with machine guns and their brass instruments worth having taken. Number 23. Never trust a hug. It's just a way to hide your face. Dark Water, Death in Heaven. Now, it's a pity that the strongest part of the story was really the opening, with the shocking death of Danny Pink and the embittered Clara confronting the Doctor, but the rest of it still had things that I enjoyed. And it's a testament to the show that even though I really didn't want Michelle Gomez's Missy to turn out to be the Master, that once she did and the character really got going, I was totally on board. Number 22.
It is customary, I think, to have an imaginary friend only during your childhood. You are to be congratulated on your persistence.
The Girl in the Fireplace. Now, in the early days of the show, this was often considered to be the best episode. I never really had that opinion, but David Tennant and Sophia Myles do have great chemistry. The Clockwork Soldiers are a really cool design, and the plot is innovative and clever, even though I could never really understand why the Doctor couldn't just go back and visit Renette before she died. Number 21. I'll do all I can to solve the death of your friend/family member/pet. Under the Lake, Before the Flood. Now this is a gripping 12th Doctor thriller with a scary threat, a memorable cast of guest characters, and some fun playing around with non-linear storytelling. The Doctor's love for Clara, which becomes so important later in the season, is really on display here. Number 20. Now football's the one with the sticks, isn't it? The Lodger. Now, there's simply no other version of the Doctor that would have been so delightfully, awkwardly weird as a roommate other than Matt Smith. Pretty much everything he does with James Corden is hilarious, and Craig and Sophie's relationship is really sweet. The plot is minimal, but it gives the episode enough structure to get us where we need to go. Number 19. Pretty soon a leader is going to emerge. You need to make sure that leader is you. Flatline. Now, Flatline introduces a great new monstrous threat with a lot of inventive and horrific imagery, especially when that poor policewoman gets dragged into a two-dimensional state. It's a big Clara episode, which is a pity if you don't like Clara, but I do, so it was a treat. Number 18. I told you, you have one chance in 1,000, but one is all you ever need. The Magician's Apprentice and The Witch's Familiar. Now, it takes about half of The Magician's Apprentice for this story to really get going, but once it does, it's really strong and enjoyable. I really like the interaction between Clara and Missy, and almost for the first time since he was introduced, Davros's inclusion really feels meaningful. Number 17. That's your plan. You're going to fire me at a planet and expect me to fix it. Asylum of the Daleks. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the whole Dalek zombie sleeper agent thing, and I think that the forced marriage problems for Amy and Rory and their simplistic solution are really weak. But aside from all that, the story is told with great style and intensity. We get the surprise introduction of Clara with her charming characterization and the really cool twist at the end about her true nature. Number 16. Every life I save is a victory. Every single one. The Time of the Doctor. Now, Matt Smith's final story is a bit too jam-packed with ideas and explanations, but given what it's trying to accomplish, it does a good job covering all its bases and giving the 11th Doctor a suitably epic and emotional send-off. The final conversation between the Doctor and Clara in the TARDIS and the abrupt nature of the regeneration itself make it one of my favorite of all such scenes. Number 15. There's a horror movie called Alien? That's really offensive. No wonder everyone keeps invading you. Last Christmas. Now, this turns out to be my favorite Christmas special, which maybe is an opinion that I'm alone in. But the episode is scary and funny and clever and sad and joyful, and against all odds, was able to bring us some closure to the relationship between Clara and Danny Pink. Number 14. Oh, you know nothing of humans, and that will be your downfall. The Stolen Earth and Journey's End. Now, the biggest and best of Russell T Davies' season finales makes a good use of a returning Davros, as well as a whole slew of familiar companions and guest stars. Rose Tyler is given as good a send-off as we could hope for, but my goodness, those final scenes with Donna are legitimately heartbreaking. It's not always a deep story, but it is epic and wide, and just what we needed. Number 13. Right, I have questions, but number 1 is this. What in the name of sanity have you got on your head? The Pandorica opens and the Big Bang. This episode gives us a really clever explanation for the season-long mystery of the Pandorica and then leads into one of the best cliffhangers that the show has ever had. The follow-up is filled with a bunch of timey-wimey nonsense that's a lot of fun, and then some heroic revelations about Rory that just make him the best. The 11th Doctor's speech to a sleeping Amelia is one of Matt Smith's best moments, and Amy remembering the Doctor back into existence at her wedding is a crowning moment of awesome. Number 12. The Angels Have the Phone Box. That's my favorite. I've got that on a t-shirt. Blink. Now, this is an unbelievably economic piece of storytelling that crams an incredible amount of plot and character into its lean runtime. Carey Mulligan's performance is really strong, and there's really clever use of David Tennant in his limited screen time. And of course, it introduces the iconic Weeping Angels. I think the only reason that the episode is not higher on my list is just because there's not more of the Doctor or the companions. It's not a fault, but it just means that there's other episodes that I love more. Number 11. Sometimes the only choices you have are bad ones, but you still have to choose. Mummy on the Orient Express. Now, this is the first unreservedly great Peter Capaldi story, with a chilling monster, some wild imagination, and outstanding character work with the Doctor and Clara. It's such a great story. I think the only disappointment is that the mystery of Gus was never followed up upon. Number 10. What are you going to do? Assemble a cabinet at them? The Day of the Doctor. Now, The Day of the Doctor is pretty much everything I could have wanted from a 50th anniversary special. There's a lot of really clever ideas included, including this notion of working on a problem over several lifetimes, first with the sonic screwdriver, and then with the Doctor himself. Would have been great to see a version of the story that Christopher Eccleston was in, but you don't really miss him thanks to the presence of John Hurt. Number 9. I will die in the knowledge that my courage did not desert me at the end. The Time of Angels, Flesh and Stone. Now this two-parter is where we saw what Stephen Moffat's Doctor Who was really capable of being, with River Song taking such a prominent role and all these creepy and fun moments with the Weeping Angels. I really liked Amy's disturbing countdown in the second episode. I only thought that Amy coming on so strongly with the Doctor at the end was a weak character moment, but otherwise, it was pure escapist entertainment. Number 8. First day I met him, he blew my job up. That's practically how he communicates. The Empty Child, the Doctor Dances. Now this is the only Christopher Eccleston story on this list, but it is a legitimate classic. Moffat does here for the first time what he'll do many times more, which is introduce ideas that are creepy and confusing and weird, and then slowly make sense out of them in a way that is really unexpected and very clever. I love the way that the story hinges on the answer to this question that's being posed all throughout. Are you my mummy? And then when we get that answer, it turns into one of the most life-affirming moments that the show has given us. Number 7. Hello, I'm Doctor Who, and these are my plucky assistants, Thing 1 and the other one. World Enough and Time, and the Doctor Falls. And except for one bit at the end with Bill, this is an incredible story which weaves together a lot of impressive elements. John Sim feels like the master to me for the first time, and Nardole gets a terrific exit. Missy's whole choice and final fate are storytelling masterstrokes. The whole thing with Bill becoming a Cyberman is wonderfully painful and full of angst, and Peter Capaldi's speech to the two masters at the end before they run away is one of his finest moments. Number 6. Why did you say 6 months? Why did you say 5 minutes? The 11th Hour. Like everybody, I was a bit sad when David Tennant was leaving the show, but it only took a few minutes of the 11th Hour to turn him into a fond memory for me. The plot is a bit thin, but I love the way that the episode allows us to discover a new Doctor through the eyes of a child who's going to grow up and become the next companion, and then to meet that companion really through the eyes of the new Doctor. The final confrontation with the Atraxi is one of the show's most fan-pleasing moments. Number 5. This is cold. Even by your standards, this is cold. Or hello, as people used to say. The Impossible Astronaut, Day of the Moon. Now this two-parter sets up the series' most ambitious story arc, which is only disappointing in the way that some threads aren't followed up upon well. Even so, it's a great story, with cool plot twists and fun set pieces and some good characterization, and beyond all that, it introduces us to the Silence, who are my favorite all-time Doctor Who monster. It was a great start to the 6th season. Number 4. Let's hope that from now on this country can find its heroes in smaller places, in the most ordinary of deeds. Human Nature and the Family of Blood. This two-parter features what I think is David Tennant's best performance in the show. The romance between John Smith and Joan Redfern is my favorite from the series. The villains are chilling, and it is a great Martha story. The only disappointment for me is those scarecrows. They don't really feel threatening, and they don't really make any sense. Does everybody in the village have identical scarecrows? I don't really get it. Number 3. We must not look at goblin men. We must not buy their fruits. Who knows upon what soil they feed, their hungry, thirsty roots. Midnight. I love Midnight. It's the best thing that Russell T Davies wrote for the show. It's like he set himself a task to write the scariest episode he could, with a limited cast and a confined setting. And he does this by stripping away everything the Doctor normally has that helps him to succeed. He's without a companion, so he's completely on his own. He loses his ability to engender trust. He even loses his ability to speak. It's one of the most effective and scary and tense episodes that the show has ever had. Number 2. I'll try my hardest not to die. Honestly, it's my main thing. Silence in the Library, Forest of the Dead. Now this is a classic, traditional, scary science fiction monster mystery with a great set of guest characters, including River Song, who becomes so important to the show's future. Really, you could see this episode as a bit of a preview of everything that Stephen Moffat was going to do when he became the head writer of Doctor Who. So well done that it's almost like he went back in time and inserted the script into the history of the show. Nothing is perfect, and so my biggest complaint here is that the Vashta-Narada, this scary, super-fast swarm of creatures, cram themselves inside of spacesuits and limit themselves into lumbering beasts that you can easily outrun. But that is a nitpick. It's a great story. Number 1. Rule 1 of dying. Don't. Heaven Sent. My favorite episode of Doctor Who is this nearly one-man show, which is really a tour de force of writing and directing and acting and production design. Peter Capaldi delivers an outstanding performance that no other Doctor could have done so well. The story deals beautifully with issues of loss and grief and mourning and anger, as well as inspiration and hope and perseverance, and ultimately brings us to one of the most epic scenes of victory, overcoming the odds, pulling victory from the ashes of defeat that the show has ever given us. For all these reasons and more, it is the episode of Doctor Who that I love the most. And that's the list. Thank you for being here with me through it, and feel free to let me know what you thought, especially all the times that you were listening to me talk and it was just driving you crazy because you couldn't believe that I liked that episode. Because I know what that's like. I'm a Doctor Who fan, and I hear about people who like Love and Monsters or The Timeless Children, and I just don't get it. But isn't it great that we can have such diversity of opinion and yet all still enjoy the same program? I am going to go and continue celebrating my 51st birthday, and part of that celebration is going to be living in hope that when a year rolls around and I am looking at something like this again, there will be a new episode of Doctor Who that I will feel compelled to include on a list of episodes that I love the most, and that we can all have enjoyed together.